Part 1. The superior man understands what is right. The inferior man understands what will sell. Confucius. Chapter 1. He was a cop. A good cop. At least, that's what Murphy told himself as he stared into the darkness outside his small prefab home. From this distance, the deserted streets seemed safe. But Murphy knew better. Beneath the silence, beneath the shadows, things were ready to explode. Still, he had accepted the transfer, like a good cop. He suddenly remembered his father. Instinctively, he took a step back from the window. His father had been killed that way, looking out a window. Hit by a stray bullet. Back when Detroit got its first taste of the Troubles. Maybe 20 years ago, when the feds had cut off loans and were urging cities to fend for themselves. The problem was that most of the major cities were strapped tighter than a snare drum. Detroit, like several other big cities, snapped. Social programs were whittled to nothing. The poor didn't understand that. They took to the streets to vent their anger. His family had lived in what was known as Old Detroit back then. There still had been families there, people who had clung all their lives to hopes and dreams. Murphy's father had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sniper. Bang. Hiss. The tinkling of shattered glass. That was the end of James Patrick Murphy. Dying, his father seemed almost amazed and amused by it all. He had moved to Detroit to make a fortune working in the auto plants. Then, the auto industry went under, and the elder Murphy wound up working for the new company in town. Omnicon. Grunt work. But the insurance had paid for the funeral. Nice, ornate coffin. Prerequisite flowers, with the Xeroxed signatures of faceless executives. His father had looked up into his startled son's eyes and whispered, "Some bitch." He had shrugged, smiled, and died. Murphy sighed. Omni Consumer Products had turned out to be the city's savior, of sorts. New housing projects, new jobs. When the city found itself bankrupt, unable to pay even the police less than a year ago, the Omnicon team marched in and simply took over the struggling city services. They now paid the police, and the fire department, and the sanitation crews, and the park commission. Hell, at least they paid you on time. Murphy heard gunshots behind him. Instinctively, he whirled around. Spotting the source, he relaxed. 10-year-old Jimmy Murphy was sprawled in front of the TV watching his favorite show, TJ Laser. Murphy tried not to smirk as the cop on the tube gunned down a half-dozen Cro-Magnon thugs, twirled his guns, and replaced them in his holster. Laser, with his slight pot belly and badly designed toupee, would have been dead meat in the old Detroit sector in 5 seconds. The sector where Murphy was heading tomorrow. Homecoming. Murphy felt his stomach tighten slightly. He was tense, but he'd be damned if he'd show it in front of his family. It was bad enough he brought the nightmares home with him. The images of screaming faces, the battered autos, the endless streams of blood and tears. He wasn't going to show weakness or worry in front of the kid and Jan. He glanced at the window and saw his own reflection in the fluctuating light of the TV. He jumped. For a second, the The face he saw was that of his father. Yeah, he had the same high cheekbones, the same deep-set blue eyes, the thin lips, eager to smile but not quite knowing how to relax that much. He forced himself to laugh at his own uneasiness. 35 years old, and he was turning into a gigantic wiener. He nearly laughed out loud. Welcome to the world of wienerdom, Murphy. Jan walked into the room. Dinner will be ready in a minute. Their eyes met. She knew how jumpy he felt. They'd been together too long for her not to know. They'd grown up together and had developed a friendship that blossomed into love. He forced himself to smile widely and, for Jimmy's benefit mostly, he rubbed a calloused hand across his tight stomach and announced, Great, Mom. I could eat a horse. Jan forced a smile in return. We had that last night. Will pot roast do? Murphy nodded. I suppose I can force myself. In front of the television, Jimmy laughed. I can if Dad can. Jan walked out towards the kitchen. A couple of wise guys. Murphy watched Jimmy settle back in front of the TV. His gaze once again wandered to the street. He wondered what would go down out there tonight, and what he'd find there tomorrow.